one of the challenging things about being a content creator is sometimes you have to speak to a large audience and be aware that there are some people who are listening who are well formed in the faith and others who may not necessarily be so, and so you kind of have to be cognizant of how do you use terms and stuff like that. And sometimes it's important to use terms in a broad sense in the way that a larger amount of people would understand rather than very, very specific and technical terms, because that's certainly going to limit the ability to communicate to people in that broader audience. So sometimes it's important to use kind of accommodating language in such circumstances. Well, to that end, I often use terms that in some cases people would contest and may scruple over and say, actually, you should be using this other term. And in reality, in some cases, it's a both and. Let me give you a perfect example, which is going to introduce us to the topic today, whether the Second Vatican Council taught anything infallibly, whether or not Episcopal consecration is the highest form of holy orders, and thus we can speak about it as Episcopal ordination. And third, whether or not Vigano was reconsecrated, or what he thinks, conditionally consecrated, because perhaps in his mind, he questioned the validity of holy orders after the Second Vatican Council. So we're going to take a look at all these things, and you'll see from this comment that I received in the comment section why we're talking about it today. I get this comment often from people who they speak out of ignorance and they attempt to correct something that I say when they're painfully ignorant about the subject matter. Let me share my screen. This is a comment I just got earlier, but it's one among many. I've received this often in the last few days, and really the last few days isn't the only time I've heard this. Look at what this commenter says whenever I was commenting recently in a short, which can only be 60 seconds according to YouTube, so you don't have the time to qualify literally every single thing. Well, I made a short talking about how Vigano has gone through this consecration ceremony, questioning his previous ordination to the episcopate. And this commenter says, do you genuinely know nothing of the Catholic religion? I mean, so here's a very assertive person who's very confident of what they believe and of their position, and who thinks they're very informed on the topic of theology. We're going to see otherwise. One is not ordained a bishop. Huh? What? One is not ordained a bishop. They are consecrated a bishop. To my knowledge, nobody has claimed that Vigano sought conditional ordination, but only conditional consecration. Okay, I see this all the time, and I just have to say, look, this should be a moment where you learn, hey, maybe I should be a little bit more humble, and instead ask questions rather than directly assert. I think that people in this position should be less assertive and just say, hey, Michael, you mentioned that he was ordained, but I often hear the term is consecrated a bishop. Can you explain to me what's going on there? And I'll be like, yeah, absolutely. But when a person has this level of hubris, it's really hard to take them seriously and be respectful. Nonetheless, I'll still try. So let me address the issue, and let me address all three of those topics that I introduced to you. So you're going to get a 3 for today, right? Good old Southern term. Not a 2 for, a 2 for 1. You're going to get a 3 for today. We're going to cover 3 things today, all because of this commenter. So let's actually start with, first of all, what the Second Vatican Council says, because this is often overlooked. I know I've spoken about it before in shows, but a lot of people haven't gotten the message. They didn't get the memo. So let's do it again. All right. So Lumen Gentium 21 says this. And the Sacred Council teaches. Now, let me stop there. Oh, but I thought this was just a pastoral council, Michael. Yeah, right. So being a pastoral council is not antithetical to teaching. they go hand in hand. You can teach in a pastoral way, right? So just because one says this is a pastoral council doesn't mean there are no teachings. Okay, and when you hear that language and the Sacred Council teaches, theologians will often point out, wait, that's relatively solemn language for the Second Vatican Council. And so what you're about to hear is going to be a solemn teaching. But I know there's going to be some objections to that. Hold your horses. I'll address them in a moment. And the Sacred Council teaches that by episcopal consecration, now there's that term, the fullness of the sacrament of orders is confirmed. What's orders? Holy orders. So what is this saying? It's saying that there are 3 degrees to holy orders, the sacrament of holy orders, the diaconate, presbyterate, and then the episcopate. The bishop is not just a glorified priest. He receives the fullness of holy orders. This is why we can actually speak of episcopal consecration as episcopal ordination. This is not a term that is unique to me. It's because it's rooted in this definitive teaching, and I'll touch on the question of whether or not it's definitive here in a moment, but it is a definitive teaching. So that you can see this is not unique to me. I'm not making this up. Even the Vatican uses this term. Holy Mass with episcopal ordinations. Now let's go back to that commenter. Let's go to him for a second here. Maybe he thinks the Vatican knows nothing about Catholicism and the Catholic religion. He might be one of those guys who actually thinks that. I don't know. There's some people out there who have that kind of arrogance. Well, do you genuinely know nothing of the Catholic religion? One is not ordained a bishop, they're consecrated a bishop, and yet their hubris has gotten them into trouble because the Second Vatican Council says otherwise. Episcopal consecration is episcopal ordination, and hence that is why you see the Vatican using terms like episcopal ordinations. And it's not just the Vatican, by the way. Here's from one of the largest archdioceses out there. This is going to be Los Angeles, Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Look at what it says here. Although already ordained priests, the bishops-elect will celebrate a 3rd and final degree of the sacrament of holy orders. The 3rd is episcopacy. The 3rd and final ordination will bring them into the fullness of the priesthood. And then it says, the Mass begins with the entrance of the ordaining bishop, consecrating bishops, the candidate for ordination, bishop select. So again, you can use either term to scruple over this and say, oh, no. You got to use episcopal consecration. You can't say episcopal ordination. There's a veiled theological error hidden behind that assertion, and that is a denial of what the Second Vatican Council is teaching, that episcopal consecration is the highest order or the fullness of holy orders. So there's an implicit theological error behind the person who scrupulously says, no, but you didn't use the word consecration. Don't you know? Stop. I see this excessively all the time. And I think it's a good teaching moment for us to learn, you know what? It's better for us to say, hey, I thought the appropriate term was episcopal consecration. You used episcopal ordination. Can you please explain? And then I'll say, yes, both terms are appropriate. They're synonyms because the church teaches the episcopate is not just a glorified aspect of the priesthood. It's not just the priesthood with some added jurisdiction, as some scholastics thought. No, the magisterium teaches it's the fullness of holy order. So I hope we've put that one to rest at this point. Thanks for watching. If you want to watch the whole video that this was a highlight of, go and check out the link in the show notes where you can see the full video. God bless. For years, I've tirelessly defended the Catholic magisterium, despite pushback from numerous people slandering this ministry, misrepresenting it, and calling for its cancellation. Our situation today is very similar to the days of St. Maximus the Confessor, who was constantly pressured to deviate from the teachings of Rome and embrace the heresies that many other bishops were promoting. He was exiled, ridiculed, slandered, but he stood fast despite this persecution, which also included the imperial court of Constantinople cutting off his arm and ripping out his tongue so that he could no longer write the truth and speak the truth. It can be costly to speak the truth and defend the papacy in an age that is so hostile towards it, just like during the days of St. Maximus. But this is what we are called to do. This is the faith and tradition of our forefathers. I plead for all Catholics to stand up for our church and defend it. And consider supporting this channel that has been vindicated by Rome's decisions time after time again. You can do that by subscribing and supporting this ministry at patreon.com/Reason and Theology or reasonandtheology.locals.com. There's also a PayPal and a GoFundMe link in the description of this video. God bless.